everyone, and welcome to Engineering Quality, the podcast where we dive into the world of software development with a focus on quality. I'm Ellie, and joining me are my wonderful co-hosts, Royal Lee and Veronica. Hi, ladies.
Hi, Ellie. Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here.
So today's topic is about career in testing. So we are going to be talking about how we got into testing, our journey so far, how we helped others along the way. And I'm going to be talking also about testing and how it is inherently a career where people often land from somewhere else. So origin stories in this industry are always fascinating. I love hearing them. So honestly, I've never met someone who said that when I grow up, I want to be a tester, right?
Yeah, that's so true, Ellie. Actually, when I was growing up, I thought that I'm going to be a business owner. I don't know why. I felt like I'm going to be a boss.
That's right.
Well, it worked out a little bit differently, but it did work out. And today we will also discuss the different paths we have seen in testing and where we will think the field is heading.
That's right, because the field testing, it's such a dynamic field and there's really so much to explore. So yeah, let's get into it.
Yes, absolutely. So we can start with the big question, right? Is testing a career that's even worth pursuing? There's so many misconceptions that we need to address. For example, a lot of people still think that testing is an unskilled profession. They believe that, to be a worthy tester, we need to know automation and coding, that you need to be an automation specialist, or that testers are just failed developers. You've heard that one, right?
Yes.
We've heard many.
Yes, for sure. And there's definitely a prevalent feeling that testing isn't a viable career path. But the reality is there is a lot of mediocre testing being done out there, and there are many mediocre testers who are doing this testing. And once an engineer or product owner or designer works with a good tester, they cannot unsee the benefit anymore. They understand the value. We have discussed in previous episodes the value that a tester can bring to the Scrum team, so we are not going to stop on this one today.
Right. And for those who have decided to pursue a career in testing, this episode is for you. And even for those who haven't made that decision yet, right? So we hope that we can show you the value throughout this podcast and in this episode in particular. And we hope to shed some light on the different career paths available. And for those who aren't testers, we aim to give you some insight into this important profession.
That's absolutely right. So let's start with our own personal journeys. So how did each of you get into testing, and what has your path been so far?
I can go first. So my path has been usual and usual. I don't know how to classify it really, because I did have computer science education. But while I was in college, I didn't feel passionate about anything that we were studying. I'm just like, okay, good, another skill that I learned. But nothing really clicked. And then I had a college friend who started to work as a tester. And she gave me a book to read about testing, the book that I'm going to talk about today a little bit more. And with that book, I felt like it's so exciting, it's so easy, and it's something that I definitely can be good at. So I just love this testing concept, testing as a career at all. It seems like something that I wanted to pursue. And I remember on my first interview, I was asked to test like a pen. I don't know. I feel like it was like a very common interview question at that time. It was like 14 years ago. And I also was asked to test like an edit box with a button, but it was like literally on paper. Like it like was edit box painted on paper, and she's like, okay, here is an edit box, test it. I was like, okay. So here's what I'm going to do. And all of this was back in Ukraine. So at that time, I even didn't speak English very well. But one of the interview tasks were to assess how good I speak English. And I needed to introduce myself in English. So it was actually a challenging task, but well, looks like I accomplished it if I'm here today with you.
That's amazing, Veronica. So you mentioned that you fell in love with testing after you read a book. So I'm curious, what book was it?
Yes, I did. This is an excellent book for everyone looking to understand the basic concepts of testing. It's actually written in Russian and unfortunately hasn't been translated in English. You know, right now I feel like I have to contact the author and ask them to translate it, because I literally, while I was prepping for this podcast, I was reviewing the book. I'm just like, this is amazing. Like, why is nothing like this in English? The book is called in Russian, but it's called like testing.com. Yes, and the author is Roman Savin.
Excellent.
So, and I want to talk a little bit more about this book, why I feel it's so great. So Roman explains the main concept and debunks common misconceptions in humorous and straightforward manner. So it's like very simple to consume. For instance, when explaining actual and expected results, right, like something like every single tester needs to know, Vermont uses next example. Imagine you bought a book about testing, but it talks about cooking. I was like, this is ridiculous, but come on, everyone would understand that, right? And in this case, the expected result would be gaining knowledge about testing, while the actual result would be learning how to cook eggs or meatloaf. Yeah, so I loved it so much because it was like, okay, if I didn't know anything about testing before, I still can understand what they're talking about. So it was very approachable, I would say. And also, Roman addresses common misconceptions about effective testing. Like, what is effective testing at all? So, for instance, one misleading criteria mentioned in the book is focus on number of bugs found, or bugs that are found, right? Like, I know some companies like to use it as like metric, and Roman is talking about why it's not a good idea. And I want to just like share the examples that he uses to illustrate it. So they use an example of a regular like e-commerce shop that sells shoes. And he explains that customers do not care about how many bugs we found and how many nights we spent testing and retesting things. Customers don't care about these things. They care about being able to choose and buy shoes, right? So this is what's important, not the number of bugs that we needed to find. So it's so clear, like, doesn't really matter like how many bugs you found. So why do you use it as a metric? It's like, okay, great, good job that you found this many bugs, but can customer make a purchase? Can you tell me this, please? An entire book is written in this playful and engaging manner. It's very easy to read, obviously, and yeah, I wish I could recommend it to everyone, but it's not in English, unfortunately.
Maybe you're gonna have to translate it, Veronica.
I probably have to contact an author right now for sure.
So someone, a book that withstands the trial of time for like 14 years, definitely is something that's worth pursuing. I wish I could read it.
Only for this reason I can translate it.
Sounds good. So I'll go next. So here's my story. I moved to Australia about many years ago. Let's just leave it like that. And I had just arrived about 2 years before, and I was looking for an office job. I was young. I could speak very little English, just like you, Veronica. And I was looking for an office job. I was working as cash out at a supermarket, and I'm like, I don't want to do that anymore. So I was able to find a job as an office helper in an insurance company. So within a year of that, I was working in the insurance underwriting department, and it was around the year 2K madness. So most of you listeners probably are too young to remember that, but there is, around the year 2000, there was a freak out, and we all thought that none of our systems were going to be able to cope with the 00 at the end.
The world was going to end.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm really dating myself here. So they needed in that insurance company some as many hands on deck as possible to help test those insurance systems, because we dealt with all types of insurance, car, home, life insurance, and obviously we couldn't let our customers not have their insurances after January 1st of the year 2000. So they put out a call throughout the organization saying that anyone that wanted to take part on these huge bug bashes they were having, that we were all happy to join. I had nothing to lose. I had no idea what testing was, but it sounded like a fun thing. They were giving people food, and I'm like, yeah, why not? Let me just go and join and see what that looks like. So I joined them. I actually ended up staying with them for about 3 months after that, until the year 2000. And in the year 2000, I joined them permanently. So I became a tester then, because they still, even though the system didn't crash as we expected it to, there were still bugs that we needed to fix. So that's how I landed my first testing job. So, for years, I had no idea what a testing industry was. There was actually a testing industry out there. I didn't know that testing was actually a career. I looked around. All I could find at that point was the ISTQB courses. I did that, but it all felt really wishy-washy for me at that point. So it didn't feel like a career. I was just, working with this team. The people are great. And I just decided to stay there for a few years. So that's how I landed my first job.
Nice.
Amazing.
Well, for me, my story is a little bit similar to both of you, my background, right? So like Veronica, I did the computer science degree. So at my college in Jamaica, at the time, they had 2 majors with the computer science degree. So it was either one that they called enterprise computing, which was like software development focused, or the other one that they called database management, which was like networking, managing databases, all that stuff. And so you could only choose between the two back then. And so I went with enterprise computing. And so we were doing PHP.NET programming. And so I knew that I wanted to do something in that field. I liked it, but I wasn't sure exactly what. And so after college, I went on to do an internship. The internship actually landed me in real estate for some weird reason. So I was doing like property management, but then I had this computer science degree and I knew that that's what I wanted to do. At the real estate company, I was supposed to be working in their IT department, but they ended up putting me managing vacation rentals, right? So that's what I was doing for a little while. And then I went on to do my master's degree. I did management information systems with a focus on security. So I was like, okay, for sure, this is what I want to do. I love information security. Maybe I could be a CIA agent. Like I was thinking a bunch of stuff, right? And then once I graduated, I wasn't sure what direction I wanted to go in. And so then I got an opportunity to work with a company doing auditing. It was with a security firm. But I also found out that I was pregnant at the time, and it was something that would have taken me away from my family for 6 weeks at a time. So I was like, there's absolutely no way that I'm taking this job. And so I had a friend who was like a mentor for me from undergrad days. And she was working at a specific company. And she was like, we have openings if you're interested. And I was like, well, what do you do? And she's like, QA. I'm like, what? What is QA? And so that was basically my introduction. I didn't understand too much about it. It was like, okay, we're testing software. I'm like, okay, that's fine. I know how to use software. I'm pretty sure I can test software. I'm pretty analytical. So I went, started the job with a basic idea of what testing entailed. And once I got into it, I literally fell in love with the whole concept of testing. testing, I realized then that this is the career path for me. Like, I'm not going back to security. I'm not doing anything. Like, I was just loving testing so much. So, yes, that's really how I really just landed into it. It just happened for me. So.
Yeah, it's cool that it's all so different. Now let's talk about well, obviously we started, right? But let's talk about what we liked about this testing job and how we decided which path we want to follow. I can go first. So I actually, the first job that I got, it was a big company, but I was assigned to the small project and my team was very isolated. So I did not have a good testing mentor or manager. So they didn't really have the concept of like, okay, all testers needs to report to test managers. They have a concept, okay, I work on this project, so I'm reporting to this project manager. So it's like, it was interesting. So I didn't even realize that having a project manager to be like my people manager is wrong before I changed the jobs. Yeah. And what I appreciate about this, and again, I didn't have anything to compare with, so I appreciated that I have an independence and I have an opportunity to experiment with approaches that I'm taking. By the way, it was my first job. I had no experience in testing. But I was developing processes that would be right for the team that I was working with.
Nice.
I really enjoyed to work with my first development team. My first team was very receptive to feedback, which gave me assurance that developers and testers are on the same side. Come on. I never thought it could be otherwise. And only after I switched jobs, I started to see different dynamics sometimes. So I was really surprised by that. I actually enjoyed very close collaboration with my engineers and so how my unique skills can benefit the team and is valued by the team. So this is how I just approached every single team that I worked after. And well, it miraculously works. I don't know how. I don't know how it just works. Yes, and after spending some time on my first job doing manual testing, I discovered this term at that time. It was like kind of like emerging, right? Automation. Oh, what is automation? Selenium, all those things, like taking over the world. How we said like in our AI episode, which actually was the first time when I felt like I can explicitly apply my computer science skills, my degree. And it was interesting and I liked it because it was not like writing the code for the sake of code. It was like writing the code to make sure that something is working. So it's like completely different reasoning behind that. So it lightened me up. And when I began my career as a tester, one of my goals from the very beginning was to climb the ladder, to become a test manager. I always wanted to be a man. I told you I wanted to be a boss. Right? So I wanted to coach and group new testers. However, over time, I realized that I enjoy learning new tech tools and putting them to good use more.
Yeah, you can be a boss other ways, right?
Yeah, exactly. This is what I was talking about. And don't get me wrong, I'm still climbing the ladder, but as an individual contributor at this point. And I love it so far. I'm not sure if it's going to change in the future, but so far I like it. And as for growing the team, it's still part of my job to mentor and uplift the team. So it's not something like it's not like I'm missing something. It's more like I gained more than I expected. What about you, Riley?
Yeah, so for me, when I started at that first company, right? So when I joined the QA team, it was a pretty developed QA team. And by that, I mean it was at least over 22 QA engineers. It was interesting. So they had the team split up to where a handful were working as what they called web QA tester. Then there was another handful working as web QA analysts, right? And then there was a handful working as web QA automation engineer.
So
We had
many
these
different distinctions.
so many
Why?
different distinctions. So I joined as a web QA tester. So started working as a web QA tester where I was literally just testing these translated websites. And then I learned that the analysts did the test plans and the test strategy and even test cases. Like the testers literally just executed test cases. That was it. The analyst did the other things. And then, of course, the automation engineer, well, it was two people actually. So they were just writing code, doing their own thing. So once I joined and I realized that I enjoyed testing, I quickly moved from the tester to the analyst. And I was working as an analyst for a while, but because I loved the industry, because I loved what I was doing and I was interested in learning more, I started attending conferences on my own and networking with other testers. And so I started to learn how other companies operate and other ways that testing could be done. And I just felt at the time that I felt like I wasn't growing the way that I wanted to grow. And so I moved to another company where I was still testing, but it wasn't web apps anymore. It was client desktop type apps.
Oh, wow.
And it was completely different from what I was doing before. Lots of good learning there as well. But I also realized quickly that that also wasn't what I wanted to do. And so when I moved from that company, that's when like I really, because at the web translation company, I was testing websites from all different domains, right? So I was testing lots of e-commerce websites, transportation companies, telecommunication companies. It was a little bit of everything. So like I was literally testing all these different websites in the different languages. So I was touching all the industries and I realized quickly that I enjoyed e-commerce, maybe because I like to shop, I don't know. But I was really enjoying testing the e-commerce websites. So when I moved to the next company, I got the opportunity to contribute to the team in different ways as a tester, right? So I was doing the manual testing. I was using automation as a tool to aid with testing. I was using all these different tools and I got so much exposure. I learned more. And the more that I grew, the more that I learned is the more that I sought more information, right? So the more that I networked, the more that I attended conferences. And then the more that I tried to figure out the path that I wanted to follow. And I realized that I enjoyed what I was doing. I loved learning, loved testing, loved doing the automation. So that's kind of the path that I took to get to the SDET route. So yeah, so that's when I decided that I loved the whole idea of being an SDET and everything that it entailed. And then while working as an SDET, right, I've always had managers and mentors who said, you should be leading a team. You should be managing a team. And I always found that I was in positions where I was managing the team from inside, if that makes sense. Like I was creating the processes. I was in cases telling managers how to run the team. And I've had people who I reported to say, listen, you should be doing management. You should get into this. And so I went on to having direct reports and I realized that I do enjoy leading, mentoring, and just helping other people grow. I love seeing new people come into the field of testing and I've had so many people look up to me and asking me for my advice, and I've given them ideas on how to grow and helping to nurture them, and just seeing them grow makes me happy. And so that's kind of what got me to this path, right? And that's really the path that I'm going to continue to go on, is growing with nurturing and mentoring and just helping other people to grow in the field.
That's amazing, really. It's again, I've never. There is no two paths in testing. There are the same, right? We all take our own paths. A little different than both of you. I also did a CS degree, but I did it after I started testing. So I had no idea what I wanted to do in college. Like I said, I had just moved to Australia, and I'm like, I don't know. So I'm not going to start a college degree until I know exactly what I want to do. So it was I had a 5-year break probably after I finished high school. And then I got that testing job, and I'm like, well, I actually like this. So that's, I went and did a computer science degree in Sydney, and I did it part-time. So I was already working full-time as a tester.
Wow.
And
Cool.
I did it part-time. It took me about 6 years to finish a 3-year degree. So that was a long time. But a funny story, though, is that during one of my object-oriented programming classes, there was a chapter in the book about testing. So I was waiting the whole semester to get to that point, because I wanted to be there in the lecture, and I wanted to give my 5 cents and whatever. So it was
You had all the experience already.
we got to that finally to that point in the book, and the teacher got to the class and he said, "Oh, we're just going to skip this chapter because there is no real testers in the real world."
What?
Exactly.
Wow.
So I'm like, "Excuse me, what?"
I'm here.
And then, I had a debate in during the lecture with the teacher for about 20 minutes, and he was saying, "But testing is not a real job, and you only have testing in those blown up companies where you need to justify, And I'm like, "Hang on a tick! Like, I know so many testers in so many different industries." And anyway, the reality is that unfortunately, some teachers do perpetuate this myth that testers don't even exist in the real world. Big companies like Google and Facebook also say that they don't need testers, they don't have testers, but we can go into that a little bit later. I diverge. So back to my career. So I in the late 2000s, it was when I actually met someone called Anne-Maria Charette. So she is an Australian tester, amazing mentor. She's a conference and keynote speaker all over the world. She's got her own consulting. And I was lucky enough to meet her, and I kind of pestered her to see if she wanted to be my mentor. And she was gracious enough to accept my request to be my mentor.
Oh, that's so cool.
And she was my mentor for a while. And through her, I met James Buck, and he became my mentor for a little while as well. And that's when I got really involved in the testing industry in Sydney, because Anne-Marie was already involved, and I kind of tagged along. Then we organized the Sydney Testers meetup at the time. And I started speaking at conferences and started my blog, and a few years later moved to the United States. And then, the rest is history. So I've been here for about 10 years now, started managing teams, and that's where my real passion lies. I love merging the technical with the people side. I think, unfortunately, in tech, there is so many people that get to be managers just because they've been in testing or in engineering for a long time, and they just move on to become managers, and they don't really enjoy the people side. And that's something that these days, luckily, you can become a staff engineer. You can grow in a career as an individual contributor. But if you go back even 10 years ago, that was not an option. So people would have to get into management if they wanted to progress in their careers. I felt like I really loved to see people grow, and I love to use my technical skills to help people grow as well. So I like to merge the people side and the technical side as well. So that's how I found my niche within the testing industry.
That
Nice.
sounds great.
You touched on a good point there, Ali, because your story with your professor, right? It goes to show the reason why a podcast like this is needed. And I really hope that it can be helpful to even people in academia, because there are so many professors who have never worked in the real world, right? So they have the book knowledge, but they don't have the real world experience. So just looking from what the book says, oh, I don't know where testing would fall into place. But if they actually worked in software development, they would realize the importance of having a tester. So
Exactly. And they, like I said, they keep perpetuating some of those myths as well. And people will leave already, college in their first jobs already with those myths perpetuated, which is not great. But this is what we're here for. So we can help break those myths. So we can just pivot very slightly here and think and just discuss a little bit about, we talked about our careers so far. What is it that we want to do or see or, achieve in the future? It's like, what are your inspirations, your plans, your dreams for the future of your career?
So I'll go first.
Okay.
I actually would love to get into academia myself. I've had this long-term vision of being an entrepreneur by day and then by night being a part-time professor. And
Oh,
with my
wow.
with my real world experience, I feel like there's so much that I could offer to the next generation of students when it comes on to software and software testing. So who knows?
Yep, absolutely. I love it.
That's awesome. I have a dream too. So, and my dream is to leave professional legacy. And for now, I feel like I want to write a book. Um, I'm very early in this journey. It's probably going to be a few years, not couple, a few years before I get from my idea to something more concrete and start getting it to life. But what I know so far, that I want to write in the intersection of testing, leadership, and women in software. So this is the topic that dear to my heart, and I feel like it's something that not really covered
Yeah,
properly.
amazing.
And if we talk about potentially like career paths, as I already said, professor by night, so I will be like a writer by night and by day. I'm like very passionate about optimizing engineering processes and incorporating the appropriate level of testing for teams. And it's always different. Every team is different. Every situation is different. Every company is different. And I aspire to eventually enter the consulting field like Ellie, your mentor, and Marie. Like,
Yes.
hopefully I will be next and Marie. We'll see. I really want to help many companies achieve higher product quality than they had ever before. What about you, Ellie?
So one thing that I am super passionate about, and it's often when I used to speak at conferences, I've stopped for years now, but is something that I really love talking about is, the breaking down the myths and the misconceptions about testing. And I bring that into every job that I take. And I feel like I repeat myself over and over again in every job, trying to explain to people, to my peers, to my managers, to people that work with me, that testing is a very skilled profession, that to do it properly, you need to be skilled. So my future aspiration, I suppose, is that, to be part of moving the tech industry into a point where we don't have to be repeating ourselves over and over again about what testers do, how important our role is, about, the testing is, not an unskilled profession, that we keep repeating ourselves. So my hope for the future is that, even this podcast can bring us a little bit closer to that point where people are much more educated about the profession, and also about the techniques and about the strategies, that even engineers know a little bit more about testing, a little bit more about quality, and get to a point where we can move the whole industry to a point where everyone understands quality better.
Thanks for sharing, Ali. That's so cool. I can definitely see you doing that. And Veronica, I love that you want to write a book. It's like full circle, right? You started with the book that inspired you, and now you're going to write a book to inspire others. I love it.
Amazing.
Well, giving back, right? And really, what you said, like becoming a professor, I actually was thinking of doing it too, but I was talking to a colleague who did it. So did a part-time professor job, and it's something really interesting, but I wasn't sure what would be the topic. But why not testing? Right? Why not testing? Come on, I don't think we have enough education in CS degree about testing at all. So that's why we need to explain ourselves every day.
Exactly. I was even doing research on a PhD program, right, that focuses on software testing. And I literally could only find one at the time when I looked. So it's definitely needed.
Absolutely. If we are going to change the whole industry, we need to start from the beginning, which is, when we educate people on what engineering is, the testing is there too, it exists. So Ladies, we have a lot to talk about this topic, right? We haven't even touched on certifications, education, skills that you need to be a good testers, networking, all of that. So I think we're going to bring this podcast to an end now, and we might need to have a part 2 of this discussion. What do you think?
I think we definitely need a part 2 for sure.
We need to do that.
So that brings us to the end of today's episode. So don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more insights and discussions on software testing and development. And stay tuned for the next episode for part 2, because we're going to talk more about this and you don't want to miss it. And of course, follow us on Instagram at engineeringquality_podcast and on X, formerly Twitter, at Engineering Qual. So see you next time on the Engineering Quality Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you found today's discussion very valuable, and we have more information for you. So as Royally said, don't forget to tune in next week.
Absolutely.
We will have more insights about our journey and main concept around this.
That's right. Lots of tips as well coming on the next episode. So tune in. And if you have any questions on any topics that we either covered here or you'd like us to cover, feel free to reach out to us on our social media channels that Royally has mentioned before. Looking forward to hearing from you, and thanks for tuning in. Bye, everybody.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.